those of you who got an invite, welcome to NerdProm.
No matter where in the world you are, we're all Nerds International. With the hyphen. Nerds International proudly presents.
We want to take you on a quest for knowledge. One that will take us from ancient medieval fantasy across the far reaches of space to the distant future. To many savage worlds.
Welcome to the Wild Die Podcast, episode 55. This is a podcast dedicated to Pinnacle Entertainment Savage Worlds, aimed at beginners and veterans alike. Everybody's looking svelte. We got the whole gang here today. It's going to be a good day so far. I got in trouble already.
Yeah, just missing Paris. Paris is ill, so no Paris. We had a nice episode planned for, well, with them leading this episode. So thanks, Paris. I hope you're feeling better, because I had to scramble and put a different episode together, but maybe I shouldn't have said anything and nobody would have known the difference, right? But yeah, Gary, you're in the doghouse, both on Facebook, on Facebook and on my wife's Facebook page.
It's been an interesting week because Gary got banned from the official Savage Worlds Facebook, and he also got banned from commenting on our wives' Facebooks.
I'm not good at Facebook. It's not my forte. Not allowed to comment on either of your wives' pages now or on the official Savage Worlds page. So,
what did you say on the Savage Worlds Facebook? Are we allowed to repeat it, or is it really bad?
It's really bad.
Well, I'm not going to repeat what I said, but I will repeat the gist of what happened.
Go.
There was a lady on Facebook that was asking questions or asking for advice about VTTs. Some guy popped in and made a comment about the price of Roll20. He's like, Roll20 for the price. But if you think about it, you can't compare free Roll20 to Fantasy Grounds. They're not even close to being on the same level. But you could compare the $10 a month version of Roll20 to paid Fantasy Grounds. They have similar features. They're pretty close. They're just different in two different ways. But the free one's nowhere near it. So if you think about it, Fantasy Grounds is actually cheaper even if you buy the Ultimate, because after 15 months, you're not paying $10 a month anymore. It's a one-shot deal. So in just 3 months over a year, you're now paying $160, and you can get Fantasy Grounds for what was it? It's on Steam sale right now, isn't it, for $110?
Yeah, something like that, 99 or something.
Right. So even if you paid full price, $150 for it, at the end of 15 months, you're now paying $160. Let's do the math over 10 years. What are you paying for that? $1,200 for Roll20, and you've still only ever paid $150 for Fantasy Grounds? Anyways, that comment led to a certain person, some kind of rebuttal, at which point I had to point out that we're here to help Susan make reasonable choices. He had claimed that that Roll20 does multiple times over different settings, and he had also made the claim that Fantasy Grounds was $300, and I merely pointed out that he was incorrect. And then he went on this big tangent and called me a couple of names because of his inaccuracies, to which point my rebuttal was extremely inappropriate. And then he private messaged me and threatened to beat me up. So
Okay.
Yeah, it was good.
So then you both got banned, right?
Yes.
Was it really spectacularly inappropriate?
Oh, mine was, yes.
Yeah,
mine
yes,
was.
Oh, I see. So is it banned forever, or are you coming back? Because you will.
No, it was a 24-hour deal, so it'll be fine for both of us.
It's like
it'll be
spending
fine.
the night in jail, right?
I'm in the drunk tank right now. Anyways.
Well, you have to behave, Gary. Gotta stop that. Well, we get a little bit of everything Last episode, of course, we received a lot of feedback, so we're going to look at that. I think it even triggered another discussion over on the Savage GM podcast, where they picked up where we left off, basically. But because of that episode, we didn't get to another question, so we're going to open the books with a question from one of the listeners. And then with the Plog, Manuel will be releasing a new updated version of the Matrix rules for his Savage Shadowrun. We got to look at it, and we're gonna discuss it, what he did with it and why, and then hopefully it's gonna be available soon with the update, and you can get it and look at it yourself. But you'll get a good preview, and that's about it. I think we've got enough for a show there. Gary entertaining us at the top of the show, so let's look at some feedback. I told you, Gary. I mean, we were. I wouldn't say we were against you last episode, but we just. Well, yeah, we were, but you received you received a lot of support, and I keep telling you this. That's why it makes such a good discussion, because apparently we're all in the wrong here, and you're in the right. You look at Matt Stark saying, "Right on, Gary, preach it, brother." I think the others are in denial about it. So
for those that don't know, last episode and the previous episode, no, I think it was just last episode, we were talking about railroading. And Gary's stance is that everyone does it. It's just that we create the illusion that we're not doing it. And that's the kind of thing. So I think, Matt Stark is saying, basically right on. Gary, you the man. He's right on board.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate Matt being on my side.
Then we got another one in. David, he says, "Hey Gary, keep railroading those sons of bitches." Spits tobacco.
He forgot to do his railroad noise, which is the woo woo.
So Gary,
I think that's David.
Gary's
Isn't that David Scott?
I think
it's David Middleton. Middleton.
Okay. Oh, sweet. That's even better, because that's the digital dungeon master.
Yeah. So you've got support from a pretty big guy in the community.
Yeah, I do.
So that's kind of annoying. But the thing is, you've now been given the nickname in the Savage Worlds community of the Savage Conductor.
Nice.
How do you feel?
I like that.
Okay.
That's pretty good. Yeah, let's all aboard. That's all I have to say. The funny part is like, I mean it in the best of ways. And it's beautiful that David Middleton came back, because being the digital dungeon master, this guy's really got to understand what I'm talking about. He does an online show. He makes a bunch of content, pre-programs in all of the encounters inside of Fantasy Grounds, takes the time to put in the tokens and make the maps. So you kind of got to sort of like, you know what I mean? You kind of got to railroad.
Yeah, you have to.
And especially when you do what we do, which is like online one-shots, it's harder to go off the tracks, because it takes so much longer to, say, find a map or something like that. And I do excuse me, my online or my in-game store stuff is with Fantasy Grounds and a giant ass TV, so all of the maps and stuff and everything is pre-programmed in there. It's kind of like playing online, but on the store or at the store. So
I remember
all aboard. Everybody get on my train.
I remember a little while ago, though, there was a thing where these guys in one of my games were going through the desert, and then they went into this sort of underground bunker that had this like route underground to the next city, right? And then the entrance that they took in caved in, so it was sort of me railroading them to have to go through that little route to the next city. And it was going to be like a dungeon type thing where it was like infested with zombies, and that was me railroading them. And they took one look at the tunnel, and I said, "You can hear the moans and groans coming from within the tunnel, And they all went, "Screw that! There's no way I'm going down there." And they were just like, "Right, let's take the time to dig out the collapsed entrance." And they just did that while other people held off the tunnel with guns. and then they just climbed back up and then just went back through the desert and went over the tunnel. So like,
yeah, that's the thing. It will backfire on you sometimes when you try to railroad or do quantum ogre on your players like that, and that it's like a force, right? A driving force from your players that want to do what they want to do, and then if you're the GM that wants to fight this force, to me it seems like it's more work in the end to try to stop them from doing what they want to do. But we get better at it.
Yeah, last episode Gary mentioned something about the there was like I can't remember what it was, but there's a hole on the train or something like this in a Deadlands adventure, and it's supposed to be in the buffet car or something like this. But in reality, it doesn't matter which car it's on. So wherever the adventurers look and investigate, he's going to put it there. So they still feel like they're progressing through the adventure and it's still railroaded and all of this. But then in some cases, like, it's not always going to be the case. Like, okay, in that case, they were supposed to go through the tunnel and find the zomboids, but there are very few ways to railroad them through that adventure and get them to go down that tunnel, I suppose. And it was like, I don't know, it doesn't always work that way, and sometimes players can feel it and they'll just completely go against it because they'll be like, okay, well, screw that. And that's why I like to be a bit more open with what they can do. And there was like one time where in my Solomon Kane campaign where the players there was this whole mission where they were supposed to investigate the Pope, and instead they thought that he was probably just going to end up being the problem at the end of the mission anyway, so they just went and killed him.
So Manuel, you weren't there that episode, and I think you listened to it. What do you think? What do you make of all this?
I make of all of this that there are some really strong opinions on both sides of that discussion, and I honestly believe that neither side is wrong. Sorry, Harrison. Sorry, Eric. And it really depends on the kind of game you are running and you want to run, and what your players are happy with. Personally, I would discuss that particular point in advance with the players of a new group. I'm like, okay, there are certain things where I'm going to just give you the direction you are supposed to go. You are going to notice if you stray from it. Are you okay with that? And if they're like, yeah, okay, cool, because you're the guy that makes the story, then yeah, sure, we're absolutely cool with it. Or they can say, no, we want to play like a sandboxy game and we want to go wherever we want to go and do whatever we want to do. So yeah, just clear that one in advance, because then you won't run into nasty surprises at the table 5 sessions in when you realize you're running a completely different game than what your players are expecting and have fun playing.
Yeah, that's a very good bit of advice, because within my group, I've run linear games specifically, and I've run non-linear games. And even with you, Manuel, when you've GM'd for us, you've run linear and non-linear games as well. Like your Savage Shadowrun one that you did for us, we had basically carte blanche to solve everything in whatever way we wanted, and ended up in like a junkyard with a trolley full of body parts with grenades attached and running it down a hill to attract zombies towards it or whatever it was. And it was completely insane. And the way that we solved all of those missions was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. But then when you've run us through Saga of the Goblin Horde and Daring Tales of the Space Lane, that was just us playing an adventure, and we were playing the encounters in the adventure. Yeah, we could, in any given scene, affect the scene and do it however we wanted, but that was just a linear thing, you know. And yeah, I think it varies from adventure to adventure. It depends. Sometimes, even if you're playing with the same group, sometimes they want to be guided through an adventure, but sometimes they want to have some freedom, like complete freedom.
Well, I think players, well, all of us as gamers, really love the idea of, a sandbox, an open world that we can actually, interact with. But very few games are like that, really. It's mostly linear, or like we said, the illusion of choice. but because of prep, here's a pet peeve of mine, and I'm gonna ask you if you guys, if it have ever happened to you guys. So you're running a campaign, right? And you end sort of not at cliffhanger, but you're like, all right, the session ended, and then you ask your players, so what are you gonna do? Well, what kind of choice are you making for the next part, the next session? Where are you gonna go? Are you gonna go back to the town, or are you gonna explore that dungeon more, that type of thing? And then they give you an answer, and you start preparing for next episode, but something happens in between that time where they change their mind. They want to do something else. So you spent all that time preparing and they change their mind, or they just come to the game, sit down and say, hey, we just talked it over and now we don't want to do that. We're going to do that instead. And all your prep goes out the window.
Well, I personally think that Savage Worlds is really really useful anyway for reusing stuff like that. Let's say, for instance, you've made a bunch of NPCs. The trappings thing in Savage Worlds is really handy for that anyway, because you could just trap the NPC to be something else anyway. If you've made, say for instance, a boss that's a monster or a big bad, well, just save it and use it elsewhere. So if they've done that, it's really easy to use elsewhere, and they're really fast to make anyway. And with the maps, I tend to, if I've made the battle map, I'll tend to just keep it and use it for something else. So it doesn't tend to annoy me that much, but I totally get that. It can be a real pain in the hole.
Does it ever happen to you, Gary?
Yeah, for sure. Those are the times that you just sort of push all of my big screen TV aside and sort of, pick up one edge of the table, shake all the stuff that I've built off onto the floor, and break out my what do you call it? My dry erase battle map, and we just cheese it up that way. Not much you can do. I do want to say something too, though. The guys over at GM's Hangout, they kind of nailed a whole bunch of points. Like, I have nothing bad to say about that episode. They didn't hang me out to dry. Excuse me again. They kind of got all the points, and actually David actually made me realize a few things from sort of an outsider's perspective. Like, I'm very module based, and the style of me railroading my players works best with my style of gaming. Mm-hmm. A lot of what I do is one shots. So, it's in and outs. I don't actually campaign. Like, I won't do it because campaigns fizzle out. And I got to tell you, I'm just going to tell you a quick story. Battlestar Galactica was probably the first show that I ever watched where they actually had a predetermined end. The story was done. Like, before that, which I don't even know when Battlestar Galactica came out, like the newer edition with the sexy Cylons and stuff like that. But every other show that I've ever watched, every other series that I ever watched has just become canceled. And I'm just sitting here with my thumb up my butt, wondering what happened in those shows, or I got to make it up in my own mind. So Battlestar Galactica was the first show I ever watched that had a finish, and I loved it for that. It was fantastic. I'm not sitting here like wondering whatever happened. So I like to have things come to completion. That sounded dirty. But I like it when there's an end. So all of the stuff that I do now actually has a start to finish. And I like to do one shots because, if my players don't show up, and because I game it, I do an open gaming table. If I don't have the same players every week, I always have a way to get out of, or, to explain why players aren't there. We're in the town. He's going off to do this. He's going to the saloon or whatever for this adventure. Mm-hmm. So that's the way I like to set my stuff up. But anyways, the guys over at GM's Hangout did a bang up job. This railroading, I just don't want it to be talked about like it's such a bad thing, because we all do it. No. I feel like the term railroading gets a bad rap, but I think that no matter what you think you're doing, if you have an idea in your head, like, this session, I want to attack my players with an ogre, or I want to attack my players with a dragon. Maybe you're thinking about it or not, but you're railroading your players into that dragon encounter, or whatever you are trying to get your players to do, they're on tracks from you to get them there, whether you think they are or not. I don't really believe too much in open sandbox kind of I think it's a farce.
One thing that I will say is that actually 2 points I want to make is, first of all, I think that the one mistake we're making is often we're saying railroading when in fact we just mean a linear game, because a railroad, I feel, is when you don't give players choice. And I mentioned last episode that I think you do give your players choice, just that there is a load of encounters that are going to happen in your game. Like you said before, you've set up the battle maps, you've got your encounters planned, and we're going to do them. That's or at least to the best of your ability, we're going to do them. However, when it comes down to scene by scene, however we want to solve them, you're always really accommodating with that. And I've played in your games, and we the amount of wacky stuff that we do in your games is awesome. And that's, to me, is not a railroady game. That's just a linear game. You prefer to run linear games because when you spoke about the flood, for example, in Deadlands, you said, "I want to see how this ends," and so that's why you run it in that linear fashion. You're playing that plot point campaign from the beginning to the end as it's written in the book, and that's a fair way of doing it. There's nothing wrong with it, but railroading is like, to me, that's when a GM has a specific way that he wants every single moment to go, or at least most moments to go. For example, he'll be like, you get to a chasm and he wants the people to swing over on the vines, so any other way that the players try to solve it, he will just cock block them and be like, no, you're not doing it that way, no, you're not doing it that way. And they go, maybe we could repair the bridge, and the GM goes, okay, you fail on your repair skill, and they go, but I rolled a 14, that's 3 raises, and he goes, no, but you still don't repair it because the wood is mouldy. And it's like, okay, fine. That's railroading, I feel.
Yeah. To me, railroading is when the GM already has determined the outcome of an encounter before it even took place.
Exactly.
He's like, all right, they're going to fight this monster and then defeat it. And after they defeat it, it transforms into something else, like a gem. And then they have to take the gem and take it to this place. To me, that's when the players are forced to fight the dragon or the monster instead of trying to come up with their own way of defeating the monster. They might avoid it. Right now, if they avoid it, you're gonna force them to fight the dragon. You're gonna put the dragon in front of them so they can fight it and defeat it. And then, if they're about to TPK, you're gonna give them more hit points, or you're gonna heal them up so that they can defeat the dragon. To me, that's railroading, and that's where it's wrong. To come up with a series of encounters is fine, but if you already decided in your mind how they need to solve it, that to me that feels wrong. Yeah, we still do it, but I remember when I listened
to the Penny Arcade Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition podcast back in the day. And they literally start the first podcast, and they're fighting the first boss, and they're just about to die, and then they have to. The GM has this goblin come in and just solve everything for them and kills everything with a crossbow, and it's like that's the sort of thing I'm talking about, because he's like, well, they can't die at this point. I get that because it's literally the first episode, but like, when people railroad, it tends to be like Eric said, they've got this dragon and they have to kill it because it's important to a story. And it's like, well, maybe not, To me, it could be, in a non-railroady campaign, it could be that they realise they're going to die, they go back to town and they figure out a different way to kill it. That would be a more fun way to do it. And even if you were doing a plot point campaign that demands that dragon die, well, the story of how they kill it can be completely different to just they go there, they beat it, and it can be a million different ways. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that railroad I do think is a bad term and should remain a bad term, but linear is the thing that we're really talking about here. And there's nothing wrong with the linear campaign. There really isn't. You see it in video games all the time. There's plenty of linear video games that are absolutely fantastic, but there's plenty of sandbox video games that are fantastic. I don't think that the sandbox game is a myth, as you say, Gary. I just think that there's a lot of people that do it badly, and I think that it's very difficult to do well.
Sweet. So back to feedback. Who else agreed with me, Lamoureux?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Who else is on the books? Who's officially penning their name under mine?
Well, there's a few kind of. I mean, Sean Richer says it's pretty great so far. About halfway in, that was the last episode. I'm dying about time zero. For what it's worth, I appreciate the Rift's approach to time travel / philosophy. Open a portal to wherever you want, whenever you feel like it, more or less. Love the podcast. Keep it going. Thank you, Sean.
But this isn't nearly as deep or as interesting as Rifts. It's basically just Savage Worlds core, but with a time travel mechanic added on top of it. Anyway, sorry.
I didn't read it as he thought Time Zero and Rift's approach to time travel were similar. But next up, a funny one from Dan Cook. This episode starts out pretty normal with everyone telling Gary he's wrong, but I got really uncomfortable once people started agreeing with him.
All right, well, maybe.
It's awesome.
Oh, we've started agreeing with him on this episode as well. All right, maybe we should go back. Gary? You're wrong about everything.
You're wrong.
Yeah.
I like the next one from Samuel Mans that says, Gary's right. You all quiet down or I will blitzkrieg all of you. I think I might have supposed to read that in a German accent, but thanks, Samuel Mans.
Yeah.
Tommy Brownell, that was on the show not long ago. I did read on here, internet, that we're supposed to kill PCs that wander off our tracks, but I don't know. I've seen that. It's true. The GMs that get mad because the players don't go where they want to go and they end up dying because of that.
Yeah, then a djinn or a genie gets summoned, or what was it, Harrison?
It was a genie. Oh man, he's not going to like you mentioning that. He hates it when we bring it up. I had a player, an unnamed player, no, a GM who I used to play with, who when we wandered off the track, summoned a genie to teach us a lesson. He claims he wasn't trying to kill us, and I do believe him, but it was a genie, and we managed to kill it.
Here's an anecdote. I must have been maybe 15 years old, so right at the beginning of my GM career, and we were playing Middle-earth role-playing, and they were in Mirkwood, and at that time the ring rates were around. So the group, the party makes camp, and they're getting ready for the night. And without foreshadowing or announcing that the ring rates were around, I asked them, "Do you make a fire or not?" And in my mind, it was they needed fire to ward off the ring rates, right? Like in the book. At that time the movie wasn't out, but it was like in the book. So they say, no, we want to keep it low profile. We don't want to announce that we're around. So I said, all right, well, you guys get killed in the middle of the night because you weren't protected against them, and I killed them because they didn't want to do what I wanted to do.
Oh, wow.
And they all looked at me like, what just happened? All right, let's roll up new characters.
How long had you been playing at that point?
That was probably my first year as a GM.
No, I mean,
not
how
as
long
a
had
player.
this campaign gone on?
Oh, I don't remember. You're talking like over 25 years ago. So.
Okay, because I think everyone's made mistakes like that. It is.
Yep.
I did some pretty bad stuff when I first started GMing as well. I remember there was one time where there was like a plot point, like railroad, that there was this sort of crow that was supposed to take this message back to the leader so that a bigger bad could come back to get the players after they killed the big bad of the first arc of this campaign. and my mate James literally threw a rock out of the window and hit the crow, and he critted twice in a row to hit the crow with a rock. And I was like, oh, you didn't hit it. And he's like, what? I rolled a crit. And I'm like, yeah, this crow, it's a fast crow, man. He's like, but I got a crit. And I'm like, yeah, it's a pretty fast crow. And he's like, all right, I'll try again. He rolls another crit. And I'm like, man, this thing's fast. It's really fast. You didn't hit it. I'm like, the crow gets away.
Yeah, don't make your players roll if you don't want that kind of stuff to happen.
Yeah.
I think, Harrison, in post, you need to edit it so that Eric says last year, not like his first year.
Yeah.
That the genie was actually more like payback.
Yeah, you know what? I deserved it.
All right, let's move on to some Savage Worlds news and Nerds International or WADI announcements.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the news. The news is incoming. Prepare yourself for the news. News! And some announcements about the Nerds International Network and the Wild Die podcast.
How long ago was it? Maybe a month or two ago, Pinnacle had this booster for Lankmar, Savage Seas of Newan, which I was on, got the PDF and all that. Really cool stuff. Now they're going to have a new one. I think it's, June 26th for the last parsec, our favorite setting. It's called Irongate. It's a prison planet with no guards. So a whole plot point campaign for that with information, of course, and there's going to be more adventures, one sheets, and all that. And yeah, I know it isn't our favorite Pinnacle setting, but what interests me about that is, like I was telling the guys earlier, I've been working on this Savage Guardians of the Galaxy kind of one shot, and I couldn't get really traction with it. I couldn't find a good adventure, and I can see potential with that, using it for an adventure, at least a base, a starting point, or maybe climax encounter on the roads. Choo-choo. They need to end up at the prison. Whatever they do,
that would actually
need
sound
to be
fun.
captured. Yeah, so we'll see. So yeah, that's coming out, so keep your eyes open for that.
Right, next
and
up.
Also, next up, NivCon 2. It was back in April. We had the first one. Bunch of games, online games, free to join with Nerds International. And now the second installment in September is up, and event and submissions. If you're a GM, you want to run a game for us, for people online, meet new nerds, that's a place to go to. There's already a bunch of them up there, and sign up is up too, so you can sign up to play in one of those sessions. I think there's about almost a dozen sessions up there now, from Savage Worlds to Genesis to bunch of different different games. There's going to be board games, card games too on Tabletop Simulator. And we're using Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, or just Skype and Discord and all that. So,
and if you sign up to a game, if you put yourself forward to run a game, check your schedule beforehand and make sure you can run the game. Okay, I just want to put that out there. Okay, because we don't want so many cancellations this time. All right.
Yeah. Shots fired.
I think I had to cancel my game last time, unfortunately.
Yeah, sorry.
I think I had to work.
Yeah, well,
that was one of the rare 6-day work weeks that actually they're not even so rare. I don't want to start complaining about my work week, man. I put in 16 hours on friggin' Wednesday, and I'm still reeling from it.
Yep.
Anyways.
Don't you usually do 7-day work weeks? And amount of days.
I want to talk about the last parsec, the booster coming out. Irongate, what's it about? What's the deal with it? Eric, did you even check it out?
He just said.
He
just said it's a prison planet.
Oh, I was okay. Never mind.
Way to pay attention, Gary.
Yeah, keep up, man.
Bad all of a sudden. I thought that he was creating a Savage Worlds Guardians of the Galaxy, where he was trying to get them onto a prison planet. Because that's...
You've got to pay attention. You've got to pay attention.
Wow.
Speaking of paying attention,
Sorry,
you mentioned...
I feel bad.
Shut up. You mentioned the GM Hangouts earlier. Has anyone mentioned when that's coming back? Because I missed that show. Anyway...
I don't even know what that means.
Well, no, because it got cancelled, didn't it? It hasn't been out for ages. I just wonder when it's coming back.
It's just called the Savage GM podcast now.
No, that's a different podcast because it's got a different name. So it's a shame. I miss it. I miss that show. Anyway, next up we're going to move on to open up the books because we've got a question in from a listener, right?
Yep.
Sweet. Let's do it.
Now, little Jimmy, you know what time it is?
Is it really?
Why, yes. It is that time indeed. It's time to open up the books.
Yes.
So, go over to Grandpa's bookshelf and go and pick any book you like. And then we'll open it up and we'll have a good look inside.
What about this one?
No, not that one. No, that's Grandpa's special book for his alone time.
Oh, okay, what about this one?
No, not that one either. That's... No, you know what, in fact, bugger off. Go away. No, I don't want to do this anymore.
Oh.
Open up the books.
Yeah, it's a question, and I kind of get the gist of it here. It's not word for word what he said, but he wants to know how to do a hex crawl in Savage Worlds, and to have like some sort of base of operation, like headquarters for your group. He said he was gonna run one himself, and he had his own ideas, but he wanted to find out what we thought about it. So for those who don't know what a hex crawl is, here's a little definition I found on the internet.
Well, I want to do this hex crawl definition. I want to read it out, but I would like you guys to give me an accent, and I'll read it in whichever accent you give me. Somalian. I don't know that, so I'm going to give it my best.
It's African. It's basically African.
A hex crawl is an open-ended sandbox-style adventure that originated in old-school D&D games. In a hex crawl, the GM produces a map of interesting points of interest, POIs, for the players to explore with a fairly large geographic area. The map is given to players, usually as an in-character item. They usually have a reason for exploring the area, but it is not clear how to achieve the objective without exploring the map more first.
Very nice.
So far we've read a person. We're not even sure who the guy is. We didn't write his question down properly. Now we're reading it like we're Somalians. This is friggin' sweet. Best podcast ever.
So that's what a hex crawl is. Typically they were done in like old school D&D and stuff, right? And nowadays a lot of OSR games, but they can be done in a variety of settings and stuff.
Yeah, I even ran one a couple years ago for Shadow of the Demon Lord. They have a really good one on there. It's really cool. And in my early days, I wouldn't say it was 100% hex scrawl, but the games I ran typically were like that, where I put stuff on the map and have the players move around and stuff happen when they arrived there. Well, the first question is, do you guys think that because it's Savage Worlds, you have to do anything different to make that type of campaign work?
The mechanics don't change. It's the hex crawl is the idea of what you're actually doing. You're just using a hexagonal map with a bunch of images on it. And then when your players, look at the map, they just go in a certain direction, right? So it doesn't affect the game mechanically.
There are some ways that you could implement Savage Worlds mechanics. I did see a couple of interesting things recently that caught my eye that might be handy for this, because there was one, they were talking about a base of operations. I don't think that's always necessary for a hex crawl, but it is something that players always want in that type of game, right? Do you remember the Savage Ghostbusters? And that had rules in it for a base of operations and how you could level it up. Obviously it wouldn't work unless you were doing a ghostbusting hex crawl, but you could take certainly inspiration from that, because it almost worked like its own character, didn't it? So
there is a game that provides you with rules for creating and running and improving a settlement. It's called Broken Earth. It's post-apocalyptic, so that should be easily moldable to fit a fantasy hex crawl as well.
perfect.
Yeah. Also, Rippers, right? Manuel's favorite, the playing the Sims in Rippers with their own lodge and stuff.
Oh,
Yeah, kind of. You could adapt the lodge rules to fit that particular kind of game.
Sweet. Another one I saw is the Savage Fallout has really good rules for random encounters, and the way it works, and I'm sorry if I get this wrong, Savage Fallout author whose name I forget, is the person with the highest survival, but I reckon you could probably just be anyone, roll survival, and depending on what the result you get is, you roll on a different table, and so it could be like, I think it's if you get a failure, you roll on like a table where it's going to be you're going to have an encounter with a monster, or if you get a success, it's going to be a friendly encounter. Raise, it's going to be you find something different like a building or something like this. I can't remember what it is, but it's like the table that you roll on depends on the level of success or the level of failure, and it's quite a cool way of doing it. And then this thing has like maybe 8 different tables depending on how you fail or succeed. It's really cool, and that's it. But it's specific to Fallout. But if you were doing a Fallout hex crawl, that would be awesome. And it's just a random encounter table, and it also has different tables for different types of terrain as well. So that would just be really handy. Yeah. So those are 2 little resources just to consider if you're doing this type of campaign or this type of adventure.
Yeah, because the core rules, I believe, has a table for random encounters, but it's very basics. But I mean, you go online and there's so many places where you can get random encounter tables and stuff like that, even decks of cards and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I mean, to me, I feel there's already something like hex crawl in Savage Worlds, and it's called 50 Fathoms.
Oh, burn, dude. Burn.
Were you gonna say that too?
I was just waiting to get there. I actually even have the thing pulled up, and I was even going to throw in some sweet pirate talk, man.
Well, go ahead. Sorry, I stole your thunder, man.
Do you know where modern day pirates exist? Somalia. So do it in that voice, please.
No, I'm out. Travel in the treacherous seas of Charybdis is an adventure in itself. The following quick method, it'll help you determine how to quickly get a vessel that travels or something. I forgot because I'm trying to do it in a pirate. Oh, then we've got a train coming in the background. Anyways. Yeah, 50 Fathoms, if you don't know, is actually kind of a hex crawl in the sense that you sort of hex your way from place to place. There's navigation, like you actually have to fly or cruise the boat around. Each square on the map inside of 50 Fathoms, it says, is equal to 5 leagues or 15 miles. Vessels cross as many squares as their travel speed each day, so that varies by boat, modified by your crew, which is super cool. So if your crew has an average boating skill, it increases the number of squares that you go. And so the captain has to make a boating roll for each day of travel and add the modifiers listed below. And then depending on how well you do, you can increase your movement, which affects things like how much cargo or food or whatever that you use and stuff like that. And the cool part is if you like botch your roll, there's also a deal too that if you get a club or something like that, it's in here somewhere. That means that an encounter comes up, and then you go to so you could be out in the middle of the middle of the ocean or whatever, and then bam, encounter happens, just random encounter.
Yeah, you got the random encounters, and then cool. You've got all the points of interest, all the the towns and villages and cities, and they all have something going on there that when you reach that hex on the map, it basically happens. So, I mean, to me, that's the best example of hex crawl in Savage Worlds.
It's pretty cool. So failure actually means the ship travels in travels its expected movement, so it goes its direction, but you have to roll a d8 to determine the direction. And the funny part is if you're like close to shore, it means you could literally like beach your ship like something bad happens, which is pretty cool. And so that's another thing that you can add in there. And if you get a raise, then it allows you to like, get extra squares. There's a whole deal with it that's actually pretty sweet. That actually, the cool part about it is like I played in my campaign, we did, boy, I don't know. I think we made it 30 or 40 days inside the campaign. I kept a list of what happened every day and who we met and stuff like this so that I could go back. And I think we made it 30 or some odd days. But the very first thing you do is get on the boat and start going. So it was pretty neat. They got attacked by a few things. I was even a random encounter Sharkman attack that I got. I converted one of the characters or one of the monsters of the day from it's D&D's monster of the day, and it was a Sharkman guy, and a bunch of them came up, and that just reminds me, so much good stuff. The Sharkmen came up and they pushed some of one guy over to chum the waters with them, and the last thing they saw was like one peg Willie or whatever went over the boat, and then later on one of them got enemy as a hindrance for something, and so I had this whole deal where one peg Willie was going to be the guy. Like when he got pulled over, the sharks didn't actually eat him; they just they gnawed on him a little bit, and then he made a deal with them to help them get whatever it was they wanted. So now it's one peg Willie was going to come back with the entire Sharkmen gang. And anyways, the ship blew up before I could get there. But one peg Willie was on the chase, man. I love 50 Fathoms. It just gets me.
Yeah, we can see a big smile on Gary's face talking about 50 Fathoms. Would you say, Gary, that in this case the ship becomes pretty much the base of operations for the group?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure it does, yep. Which is kind of a nice part of the hex crawl thing in this situation, because your base comes with you. Like in a hex crawl, you might have to go through some swamps, you might have to fight a dragon, you might have to do, whatever's in each hex. And I was just thinking, man, if you go back to your base of operations, you'd have to go back through that swamp every time. And so, yeah, at least this way you're bringing your deal with you, which is pretty cool.
It's the podcast log. Manuel, I remember a while back we did a one shot with just me playing, and we played with the old Matrix rules for Savage Shadowrun 2nd edition, and I had a blast, an absolute blast. I remember firing energy ponies out of my wrist computer or something. It was good fun, but you've updated them recently, so what's the dizzle? Give me the lowdown. They're faster, they're more slick, they're greased up. Tell me about it.
So the feedback I got for the Matrix rules in Savage Shadowrun 2nd edition was, they work because they were streamlined to work just like regular skills, just that there were utilities you'd have to buy, so people wouldn't have to learn a completely new way of handling something. They could just go with how skills work. But the problem still remained that when the Decker went into the system, that could just take quite some time, during which the rest of the group was sitting around having nothing to do, or it would end in the GM having to jump back and forth between the Decker, who was in virtual reality, and the group who were doing something else, and it would get kind of confusing. So a lot of people asked me if I could streamline that system and make it faster without necessarily sacrificing the feeling. So what I came up with, and which is in playtesting right now, is a system that takes the dramatic tasks from the core rulebook and modifies it a bit, adapts it to Shadowrun, but uses the same basic idea to handle a complete Matrix run with just 5 rolls.
So, for those that don't know, in Shadowrun, whenever you do hacking, you have to deck in. Is that the right terminology?
Yeah, kind of.
And then you plug your head into a computer, and then you're in the Matrix, which is what they used to call the internet back in the 80s. If you're in Shadowrun. If you're in Shadowrun, that is. And then once you're in there, you run around. If you remember that Futurama episode where they're in the internet, sort of looks a bit like that, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So that, and now it works a little bit like a dramatic task. So you can sort of do an entire Matrix run with just like 5 pulls of a card and 5 rolls. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly that. So I took the basic idea of the dramatic task and I expanded on it a bit, which removes a lot of what people seem to consider clutter on the Matrix Run system. So you don't have to buy utilities because you're only using your decking skill. You don't have to manage your cyber deck and keep your hardware up to date and watch out for various things regarding the hardware. You buy a cyber deck which gives you one stat, and you compare that stat to the difficulty of the system. So the basic dramatic task is you make 5 rolls with a chosen skill at -2. You accumulate successes and raises. If you manage to land 5, bam, you're done, you win. That's quick, it's easy, it's elegant. You can use it for a variety of situations.
Yeah. Basically, instead of the usual -2 throughout the dramatic task, you added like the security levels of the mainframe computer that you're trying to hack, basically, right?
Exactly. I added various modifiers, but it's still a rather small table. I believe at the moment it's like 10 entries, and 5 of those are the basic modifier of the security system you are trying to hack into. So the standard dramatic task starts at -2, so that's what your base run-of-the-mill home system is going to be. It's a dramatic task at -2, and then as security increases, the modifier, the penalties get harder, up to -5 for a hardened corporate system with really nasty defenses in it. But also, to offset that, there is an edge the decker can take once per rank, which allows him to ignore 1 point of penalty. So if you are committed to playing a decking character, by the time you hit legendary, you're not even going to have a negative a penalty when decking into hardened systems, just because you are that good. But then there's stuff like if the system is on alert, if you have passcodes which you can obtain, which other characters like the face of the group could obtain for you, if the hardware of your cyber deck is better or worse than the system you're trying to deck into. It's some modifiers, but that's something you have only to calculate basically once at the beginning, and only alert status is going to change, but that's not that big of a deal. And then you just go through 5 determined steps. You draw a card each round. And if you draw clubs, there is complications that tell you what will happen because there is a complication and what the consequences will be if you fail. Now, the biggest change I made to the standard dramatic task is if you fail one step, that's not a big deal, right? But if you fail a complication in core, that ends the dramatic task. Here it does not, but the complications are really, really bad. So if you fail a complication, you are going to get punished, and that could add up really, really fast, and it could end with the decker getting kicked out of the system and actually suffering wounds because of it.
So basically, you still need to go through all 5 steps, and you need to accumulate those 5 successes, right?
Yeah, exactly. You need to complete every single step. You need to get to 5 successes. It doesn't end when you reach 5 successes because you are doing a matrix run. You can't just be like, okay, I'm trying to break into the front door and my decking die aced a gazillion times, so now I have 16 successes, bang, I'm done. Doesn't work that way. You have to complete all 5 steps. You have to complete the whole run, but the more successes you accumulate, the better. So that is something where your GM can say, okay, it's either a flawless run, they're never going to find any traces of you even being in the system, or you find additional pay data you can sell just for their monetary value. You find additional intel beyond what you were looking for, something like that.
So I'm looking at the steps here. Step 1, breaking in. Step 2, avoid security. Step 3, navigate the system. Step 4, locate the paid data or manipulate the system, whatever the reason why you were in there for, right? And then step 5, get out. So let's say I go through all these 5 steps and I don't get my 5 successes. I get, I don't know, maybe 3 because the penalty was so high, but I still completed step 4, which was to locate the paid data. Now, is it that I can't get out with the data, or what happens there?
That is actually a point that is still in development. There are a few roads I could take with this one. At the moment, I'm leaning towards let the GM make up what bad thing happens because you didn't actually complete it. So in the case of locating pay data, it may be just that you fell for a trap, fell for a honeypot, and you jack out because you didn't have the time. You were in there, security was hot on your heels because you weren't accumulating many successes at that point. You probably also were in 1 or 2 fights in cyberspace and you got winged a bit. So you just grabbed whatever you could and you got out. And then when you were back out, you had time to look through the data, and then you realize, well, crap, what I picked was potentially worth something, but it wasn't at all what we were looking for. It's completely worthless to us, except maybe we can sell it to somebody for money. But yeah, doesn't really work that way. If you manipulate the system, it could be like, yeah, it works for like a single round, and then security sweeps in, resets all the passcodes, all the door codes, and it was basically at that point for nothing what you did.
Yeah, that's interesting. Why I wanted to bring this up for this episode, because to me, a Matrix run is basically a virtual heist. So
Yeah,
I look at that system there, and it could be used to run heists and different type of heist. It could be a physical one for burglars, or even a heist like spy type of campaign. It could be like that too. So yeah,
that's actually thank you. That is actually a point of feedback I've already gotten from somebody else who had a look at it. Good friend of the show, Richard Woolcock, and he pointed out to me that I could make a generic hacking system out of that. So as soon as I place tested it a little more, and I've released it with Savage Shadowrun, I'm going to make a generic version of that, and I'm going to be releasing that on DriveThru RPG as a fan product. It's going to be completely free. So it's going to be interesting to see what people can use this for.
So, what's it like having Richard Woolcock as your best friend? I'm just assuming it's similar to the way that Eric feels about hanging out with me.
What? No, that can't be, because Richard Woolcock's like a really nice guy.
What?
Yeah, he doesn't post really inappropriate stuff on wives' Facebooks.
I don't know what you're talking about.
In my defense, with my one though, Gary, when he posted on my wife's Facebook, he was talking about putting a finger up my bum. So he was being inappropriate to me just on my wife's Facebook. So I can accept.
So let's wrap the show up.
Yo, motherfuckers, you all best back up. I always got a gun, I always come strap up. What I'm trying to say is it's time for the wrap up. Yeah, this one goes out to all the ladies and all the men out there. Everyone in the front row, grease up. Yeah. Oh,
So,
yeah.
so we want to give a big shout out to the Many Savage Worlds. Tell us all about that, Eric.
Yeah, that's a new YouTube show for Savage Worlds with Dan Cook and his crew. Basically, what they do is they come up with a genre, a setting for Savage Worlds, and they build it from scratch on the show. They take one episode to build it together, decide, how it's going to work, what kind of mechanics they're going to use. And then the following episode, they run like a short one-shot using the material, that they used previously. So they've been going at it for a couple months now. So check it out. One more Savage Worlds show out there. And I know there's also Ron Blessing was working on his own Savage Worlds podcast. He posted something like hinting at it, like he bought the domain for it. So okay. I believe it's Savage Interludes. So there's more Savage Worlds goodness out there.
Just know one thing, though, Ron Blessing and Many Savage Worlds. Just know one thing, okay? When you're entering on our turf, all right, there are certain things, certain people you need to pay some money to, okay? And if you don't do that, accidents can happen. That's all I'm saying. Somebody's gonna slip on some butter on some floor and they're gonna break their legs. All right.
Yeah, or some inappropriate comments will be posted on your Facebook.
Exactly. I mean, I ain't saying I'm gonna do it because I would never do that. But I'm just saying, watch out, watch out. It's a dangerous world out there.
Ron Blessing and Christian Serrano are good buddies. I'm surprised they're not doing a podcast together. And we all know that Christian Serrano's the sexiest voice on the internet. And so with the Savage interludes, maybe there's some Savage sexy interludes or something like that going on there.
Interlubes.
That's what I'm thinking.
We're going to cut that out.
Yeah, we better cut that out.
So what's this about Paul Lawrence? I met this guy once. He's a very nice man. He's done some work recently.
Yeah, again, Facebook all the time. He's working on some pre-gens for a one-shot he wants to run. I don't remember what it is, but I saw something on there that really caught my attention. I mean, there's always people coming up with their own Savage Rules hack and new rules and ideas, and mostly they're bleep. But his idea was pretty cool, actually. I see. So he's got a one sheet, right? A pre-gen character, and in the bottom corner there's a card, one card from the action deck. So it could be, I think, like it's the 4 of diamonds or something like that. And that card has a special ability that unlocks when the card is drawn during combat or whenever. So if it's your turn and you're drawing your card, there's like you get like a special boon. It was kind of too small for me to read well, but I can only imagine the type of things that you can do with that, where it's basically like an adventure card, maybe bonus type of thing.
Yeah, he did this kind of thing at ShakeCon, the Savage Worlds convention that we went to, and it was
did
like, yeah. So you had a pet. It was a goblin game that we played, and you had a pet, and it would activate on your card when it was drawn, and your pet would have some sort of weird ability. So I had a spider that would like shoot webs into people's eyes and blind them. I'm fairly certain that's what it was. And then like other people had, like Manuel just had a creature. Nobody knows what it was, but it was in his barrel of booze, and it would do something.
Nice.
And if it drew the card, it would jump out and bite people in the face and then hide back into the barrel of grog.
Yeah.
Wow, it sounds like Eric at our gaming conventions.
Yeah, you have to draw the Joker for that. But no, I thought it was a really fun idea. It reminded me of the wild card edges that nobody really takes because it never happens. But with this, it's like you don't have to take an edge for that. It's just like something extra for your character. So maybe give people ideas for their own campaigns, or if they're making a one shot. Sorry, Paul, I'm stealing that idea. So
take that. All right, so if you want to contact us, you can do that. We've actually got ways, believe it or not. There's this thing called email, and you can contact us at thewilddie@gmail.com. We're also on Google+, Facebook, and YouTube at The Wild Die Podcast. And, of course, we're on the Nerds International community if you want to mingle with us. And we're on Twitter at The Wild Die. And if you like what we do and would like to chuck us a buck and show some appreciation, please do, because we're on patreon.com/The Wild Die. And at this point, of course, we would like to thank our Patreons via the following song.
Sean Richard, Jason Connolly, J. Raz Alan Bray, Mr. Stag, Conrad Erasmus Neubert, Corey Dersham, Pure Mongrel, Sophia, Robtau, CJ Stott, Bubbles, Peter Adams, Gil Dashard, John Peterson, yeah! Here I go, yes! 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 Get your boys on march, I'm right there on the spotlight, lunchables, cause boys like you trying to take the biscuit, trying to bash me up where you're betting on Ripkit.
So that concludes another episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Had a little bit of everything in there. It's like, when you're running out of ingredients in your house and you just try to get all of them to make a good meal. I hope that's what it feels like. But, of course, now we got to go because we got stuff to do. All right, so bye.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks everybody, and thanks for listening to the show. I hope it was still a decent show put together at the last minute. It's just us talking, basically.
Well, that's what
doesn't
a podcast
change
is.
anything. Yeah. So this is Eric saying, grab your sword by the balls. Walls.
Grapple the skies.
Walls.
This was Manuel saying, if the future puts you on rails, beware of crossing hexes.
Walls.
Always so relevant, man. All right. Keep your pants on. Keep it fun. Thanks, everybody. We're out.
Balls.
Balls.
Walls. It's BWOLS.
Balls.
Walls.
The Wild Eye Podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by Pinnacle Entertainment Group or official Pinnacle licensees. Any of the products mentioned on our show or appear on our website are the property and copyright of the respective owners. All music and artwork is used with permission of Pinnacle Entertainment Group. All items are used under fair use and educational and review purposes. All other items are the intellectual property of the Wild Eye Podcast.